Station Commander Vex-High had witnessed many historic moments during her 3 centuries of service at Nexus Prime, the galaxy's largest trade hub. She'd seen the first Zephyrian motherships emerge from their decade-long hibernation cycles, watched the crystalline Vorthan fleets perform their legendary synchronized jumps, and even observed the mysterious Shadow Collective's rare appearances at the station's outer docks. Nothing, however, had prepared her for this moment. The proximity alarms had been screaming for the past hour, their shrill warnings echoing through every corridor of the massive station. Initially, Vex-High assumed it was another malfunction in the aging sensor array. Nexus Prime was old, built during the Third Galactic Expansion, and its systems frequently registered ghost contacts or phantom mass readings. But as she stood in the command center, staring at the main display with growing disbelief, she realized this was no technical error. Commander, her aide, a nervous young Kalari named Tess, approached with trembling appendages. The long-range sensors are detecting an object approximately 47 million kilometers out and closing. The mass readings they're impossible, ma'am. Vex-High's compound eyes focused on the data streams cascading across her workstation. The numbers made no sense. According to the sensors, something roughly the size of a small moon was approaching Nexus Prime at sublight speeds. But that was absurd. No ship in galactic history had ever been built on such a scale. Even the legendary Titan-class vessels of the extinct progenitor race had been mere kilometers in length. "Run a full diagnostic on all sensor arrays," she commanded, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her thorax. "This has to be some kind of interference pattern or gravitational anomaly." The diagnostics came back clean. Whatever was approaching them was real, massive, and moving with obvious intelligence and purpose. Vex-High activated the station's emergency protocols, sending automated warnings to all dock vessels and alerting the Galactic Council's emergency response fleet. If this was some kind of rogue planet or artificial construct, they needed to evacuate Nexus Prime immediately. 20 minutes later, the object came into visual range of the station's most powerful telescopes. Vex-High felt her respiratory system freeze as the first images appeared on the main screen. It wasn't a rogue planet or some ancient derelict. It was a ship. The vessel defied every principle of engineering that had governed galactic civilization for over 10,000 years. Its hull stretched across hundreds of kilometers, a sleek, metallic leviathan that seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. The ship's surface was covered in structures that looked like cities, with towers and spires reaching up from the hull like the peaks of mountain ranges. Massive weapons emplacements dotted its flanks, each one larger than most species' entire battleships. But what truly made Vex-High's blood run cold were the engines. The ship's rear section housed propulsion systems that glowed with an energy signature unlike anything in the galactic databases. The power readings alone suggested that this single vessel could generate more energy than most star systems consumed in a year. "Commander," Tess whispered, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the command center. "We're receiving a transmission. It's from the ship." The main screen flickered, and suddenly Vex-High found herself looking at something she'd only seen in historical archives and xenobiology textbooks. A human face filled the display, belonging to a species that had been considered nothing more than a backwater curiosity from a small yellow star system. The being had dark skin, short black hair, and those distinctive small eyes that marked their kind as one of the galaxy's most primitive races. "Greetings, Nexus Prime," the human said, its voice carrying an accent that the universal translators struggled to process. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth vessel Leviathan. We're requesting permission to dock and establish formal first contact with the Galactic Council. We come in peace, but we come prepared." Vex-High stared at the transmission in stunned silence. Humans, the same species that, according to the last intelligence reports, had barely achieved faster-than-light travel and were still confined to their home system. Yet here they were, piloting a ship that made the galaxy's most advanced civilizations look like children playing with toys. "Commander," her communications officer called out, panic creeping into his voice. "We're detecting massive energy buildups across the ship's hull. Whatever their weapon systems are, they're powering up." The human captain seemed to notice their distress. Please don't be alarmed by our defensive preparations. We've learned that first impressions matter in interspecies relations. The Leviathan is equipped with appropriate safeguards for any misunderstandings that might arise. As if to emphasize the point, sections of the massive ship's hull began to retract, revealing weapon systems that looked like they could crack planets in half. The energy reading spiked so dramatically that several of Nexus Prime sensors simply shut down to prevent overload damage. Vex-High realized with growing horror that everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity was wrong. Dead wrong. News of a human arrival spread across the galaxy at the speed of quantum communication, racing through the vast network of relay stations and diplomatic channels that connected thousands of civilized worlds. Within hours of the Leviathan's appearance at Nexus Prime, emergency sessions were being called in council chambers, war rooms, and throne halls across every major sector of space. On the crystalline world of Vorth Prime, High Crystal Arch ZY observed the transmitted images with growing alarm. The Vorthans had ruled the galactic community for over 3 millennia, their advanced technology and superior intellect making them the natural leaders of interstellar civilization. Their fleet of geometric crystal ships had been the galaxy's most feared military force, each vessel a masterwork of engineering that could slice through conventional matter like paper. Now, staring at the impossibly massive human ship, ZY felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries. Genuine fear. Analysis complete. High Crystal Arch, her chief military advisor reported, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. The human vessel's mass exceeds our largest dreadnought by a factor of approximately 8,000. Its energy output suggests weapons capabilities that could destroy our entire home fleet in a single engagement. ZY faceted eyes refracted the light from the tactical displays, creating rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated that humans had barely achieved basic spaceflight. They should be millennia away from constructing anything like this. Meanwhile, in the biomechanical hives of the Swarm Collective, a different kind of analysis was taking place. Queen Mind HFY processed the incoming data through millions of connected consciousness nodes, her vast intellect trying to comprehend the implications of human technology. The Swarm had conquered dozens of systems through pure biological superiority, their living ships adapting and evolving to overcome any obstacle. But the Leviathan represented something beyond adaptation or evolution. It was a monument to raw engineering prowess that suggested humans had found ways to bypass the natural limitations that govern all other life forms. The weapon signatures are unlike anything in our genetic memory, reported Warmind Clickstar, one of HFY's primary combat personalities. These humans have created tools that exist outside our understanding of physics. If they chose to attack, our biological advantages would be meaningless. Back at Nexus Prime, Station Commander Vex-High found herself in the unenviable position of hosting what might be the most important diplomatic encounter in galactic history. The Leviathan had positioned itself in a stable orbit around the station, its massive bulk creating gravitational effects that required constant adjustment of Nexus Prime's positioning systems. Captain Chin had agreed to meet with representatives from the major galactic powers, but she'd made it clear that only a small delegation would be permitted aboard the human ship. The security implications were staggering. If the humans decided to take hostages, there wasn't a military force in the galaxy capable of mounting a rescue operation. Captain Chun, Vex-High addressed a human during their latest communication. The Galactic Council has agreed to your terms for a diplomatic meeting. However, they're requesting additional information about your ship's capabilities and intentions. The scale of your vessel has caused considerable concern among our member species. The human captain's expression remained carefully neutral, but Vex-High caught something in those small eyes that might have been amusement. Commander Vex-High, I appreciate the Council's caution. However, I think it's important for everyone to understand that the Leviathan represents the minimum threshold of human spacefaring technology. We didn't send our most advanced vessels for first contact. The statement hit Vex-High like a physical blow. If this impossibly massive ship was considered basic human technology, what did their advanced vessels look like? The implications were terrifying to contemplate. On the industrial worlds of the Mechanarch Union, automated factories have been working around the clock since news of the human arrival reached their networks. Supreme Construct Alpha Prime, the artificial intelligence that governed their collective consciousness, had immediately begun war preparations upon analyzing the Leviathan specifications. Probability of successful military engagement with human forces. Less than 0.01%. Alpha Prime calculated through its vast computational matrix. Recommended course of action: immediate diplomatic overtures and technology sharing agreements. But not every species was prepared to accept humanity's sudden emergence as a galactic superpower. In the shadowy council chambers of the hegemony, a collection of species that had built their empire through conquest and subjugation, different plans were taking shape. The humans are a threat that must be eliminated before they fully establish themselves, declared War Marshal Grixtalk, his scarred face twisted with hatred. If we allow them to integrate into the galactic community, our entire way of life will be destroyed. They must be dealt with while they're still isolated and vulnerable. The War Marshal's words carried weight among the hegemony's leadership. They had built their power through careful application of superior firepower and ruthless tactics. But the Leviathan represented a level of military capability that could render their entire fleet obsolete overnight. As diplomatic delegations prepared to meet with humanity's representatives, secret military conferences were already planning for war. The galaxy had been forever changed by humanity's arrival, and not everyone was prepared to accept their new reality peacefully. The age of human dominance had begun, whether the galaxy wanted it or not. The diplomatic meeting took place in the Leviathan's primary conference chamber, a space so vast that it could have housed entire city blocks. Representatives from 12 major galactic civilizations sat around a table made for what appeared to be a single piece of crystallized starlight, its surface reflecting depths that seemed to extend into infinity. Ambassador Elena Vasquez led the human delegation, her calm demeanor masking the significance of the moment. Behind her stood Captain Chun and 3 other humans, their simple uniforms contrasting sharply with the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by their alien counterparts. High Crystal Archwyaxendra was the first to speak, her crystalline voice carrying harmonics that resonated to the chamber's acoustically perfect walls. Ambassador Vasquez, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome humanity to the interstellar community. However, we must address the elephant in the room: the unprecedented scale and apparent capabilities of your vessel. Elena smiled, a gesture that several of the alien delegates found unsettling. High Crystal Arch, I appreciate your directness. The Leviathan is indeed impressive, but I want to assure everyone present that humanity comes in peace. We have no territorial ambitions or desire for conquest. Queen Mind HSS Thara's biomechanical voice buzzed with controlled aggression. Peace is a luxury afforded to the weak. Human, your ship carries enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. What assurance do we have that you won't use it? The same assurance you give us, Elena replied evenly. Mutual respect and the understanding that destruction benefits no one. However, I should point out that the Leviathan is primarily an exploration and colonization vessel, not a warship. The silence that followed this statement was deafening. If this massive construct was merely an exploration ship, what did human military vessels look like? War Marshal Grixtalk leaned forward, his scarred features twisted with barely contained hostility. You claim peaceful intentions, yet you arrive with a weapon of unimaginable power. The hegemony views this as an act of aggression. Captain Chin stepped forward, her voice carrying a hard edge that hadn't been present in their earlier communications. War Marshal, with respect, the Leviathan carries defensive systems appropriate to the threats we might encounter in unknown space. If you interpret our preparedness as aggression, perhaps you should examine your own intentions. The captain's words sparked angry muttering among several delegates, but Elena raised her hand for silence. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Humanity seeks to join the galactic community as partners, not conquerors. We have technologies and resources that could benefit everyone. Supreme Construct Alpha Prime's mechanical voice cut through the tension. Specified technologies and resources, human ambassador. The Mechanarch Union requires concrete data for proper evaluation. Elena activated a holographic display that materialized above the conference table. The three-dimensional images showed stellar maps, technical schematics, and resource surveys that made several delegates gasp in recognition. Humanity has developed faster-than-light travel systems that are approximately 40% more efficient than current galactic standards, Elena began. Our manufacturing techniques can produce materials with molecular structures that shouldn't be possible according to known physics. We've also solved several energy generation problems that have limited expansion in the outer rim territories. The implications were staggering. If humans could share these technologies, it would revolutionize galactic civilization, but it would also make humanity's position as the dominant technological power unassailable. ZYXander's crystalline form flickered with rapid calculations. These technologies, they would transform our entire understanding of engineering principles. What would humanity want in exchange for sharing such knowledge? Simple recognition as an equal member of the galactic community, Elena replied. Access to established trade routes, diplomatic relations, and the same rights and protections afforded to all civilized species. But War Marshal Grixtalk wasn't satisfied with diplomatic niceties. You speak of equality, yet your single ship outclasses our combined fleets. How can there be equality when the balance of power is so dramatically skewed? Elena's expression hardened slightly. War Marshal, humanity learned long ago that true strength comes from cooperation, not domination. We've seen what happens when species focus purely on military might at the expense of progress and prosperity. The veiled reference to humanity's own violent history wasn't lost on the assembled delegates. Several species had studied human civilization and were aware of their tendency towards self-destructive warfare. The fact that they had apparently overcome these tendencies while simultaneously developing overwhelming military capabilities was deeply troubling. Queen Mind HSSRA's biomechanical eyes focused intently on the human delegation. You claim to seek cooperation, yet you withhold information about your true capabilities. How many ships like the Leviathan does humanity possess? Elena exchanged a brief glance with Captain Chun before responding. The Leviathan is one of 7 Titan-class exploration vessels currently in service. We also maintain appropriate defensive fleets for protection of human space. The number sent shockwaves through the conference chamber. 7 ships of this magnitude represented more raw military power than most galactic sectors could muster, and Elena's casual mention of appropriate defensive fleets suggested that humanity's total naval capacity was beyond the delegates' ability to comprehend. Supreme Construct Alpha Prime's processing centers worked frantically to analyze the implications. Query: define appropriate defensive fleets in numerical terms. Elena's smile returned, but this time it carried a subtle warning. Let's just say that humanity believes in being prepared for any eventuality. We've learned that the universe can be a dangerous place. As the meeting continued, it became increasingly clear that humanity's arrival had fundamentally altered the galactic balance of power. Some species saw opportunity in cooperation with these technologically superior newcomers. Others saw only the threat of obsolescence and eventual subjugation. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. 3 weeks after the historic First Contact meeting, the galaxy erupted into chaos. The hegemony's attack came without warning, launched from hidden bases in the Void Sector, where their black ships had been gathering for months. War Marshal Grixtalk had convinced his allies that humanity represented an existential threat that had to be eliminated before they could fully establish themselves in galactic politics. The assault force was massive by any historical standard: 300 heavy cruisers, 50 Dreadnought-class battleships, and 2 Planet Killer siege engines that had never been defeated in combat. The hegemony strategy was simple and brutal: destroy the Leviathan and prove to the galaxy that human technology was not invincible. Captain Chen received the first proximity alerts while reviewing colonization surveys in her private quarters. The Leviathan's automated defense systems had detected the approaching fleet hours before they reached engagement range, giving her time to prepare for what was clearly going to be the most significant military action in recent galactic history. All hands, battle stations. Her voice echoed to a massive ship's communication system, reaching crew members spread across dozens of decks and thousands of compartments. This is not a drill. We have incoming hostiles with apparent aggressive intent. The bridge of the Leviathan was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the cramped, efficiency-focused command centers typical of most species' flagships, humans had created a vast open space with multiple levels and dozens of control stations. Officers moved with practiced precision, their actions coordinated by artificial intelligence systems that process information faster than biological minds could comprehend. "Captain," reported Commander Martinez, the ship's tactical officer, "the incoming fleet matches hegemony configurations. 352 vessels total, including 2 super heavy platforms. They'll be in weapons range in approximately 40 minutes. Chen nodded grimly. She had hoped that humanity's peaceful intentions would be accepted by all galactic powers, but she'd also been a military officer for over 20 years. Some conflicts were inevitable, regardless of diplomatic efforts. "Signal the hegemony fleet," she ordered. "Offer them one final opportunity to withdraw. Make it clear that we have no desire for combat, but we will defend ourselves if attacked." The response came back within minutes, transmitted on open channels so that the entire galaxy could witness the exchange. War Marshal Grickstock's scarred face filled the communication screen, his expression twisted with hatred and determination. "Human vessel, you have contaminated our galaxy with your presence long enough. The hegemony will not allow your species to threaten the natural order. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." Chen's expression remained calm, but those who knew her well could see the dangerous glint in her eyes. "War Marshal, this is your final warning. Cease your aggressive approach immediately. The Leviathan is fully prepared to defend itself, and you will not like the consequences of forcing this engagement." Grickstock's laughter was harsh and mocking. "One ship against our entire battle fleet? Your arrogance will be your downfall. Human, all vessels, attack formation. Show these primitives what real power looks like." What happened next became known throughout the galaxy as the Battle of Nexus Point, though historians would later argue that battle was hardly an appropriate term for what amounted to a demonstration of technological superiority, so complete that it redefined warfare itself. The hegemony fleet opened fire at maximum range, their weapons lighting up space with display of destructive energy that should have been sufficient to crack a moon in half. Plasma beams, kinetic projectiles, and exotic energy weapons converged on the Leviathan's position in a coordinated barrage that represented the concentrated firepower of one of the galaxy's most militaristic civilizations. The weapons struck the human ship's defensive barriers and simply disappeared. Not deflected, not absorbed, they vanished as if they had never existed at all. "Impossible," Grickstock whispered, staring at his tactical displays in disbelief. "No shield technology can completely negate that level of firepower." Captain Chen's voice carried across the communication channels, her tone still calm, but now carrying an undertone of steel. "War Marshal, you've had your demonstration. Our defensive systems have neutralized your opening barrage without strain. This is your absolute final opportunity to withdraw before we respond." But the hegemony had committed too much to this attack to retreat now. Their entire reputation as a galactic power was built on military superiority and ruthless efficiency. To flee from a single enemy vessel would mean the end of their empire's credibility. "All ships, concentrate fire on a single point," Grickstock commanded. "Overload their shields through focused bombardment. Deploy the siege engines." The 2 planet killer weapons moved forward, their massive forms dwarfing even the largest battleships in the fleet. These were the hegemony's ultimate weapons, designed to crack planetary crusts and boil away atmospheres. If anything could penetrate human defenses, it would be these instruments of absolute destruction. But as the siege engines powered up their primary weapons, something unprecedented happened. The Leviathan began to change. Sections of its hull retracted to reveal weapon systems that defied classification. Energy began building along the ship's flanks, creating gravitational distortions that bent space itself around the massive vessel. The very fabric of reality seemed to ripple and flex as the human ship prepared to demonstrate why the galaxy's greatest military powers had suddenly become obsolete. "Dear gods," whispered one of Grickstock's tactical officers, his voice barely audible over the alert sirens. "What are they built?" Captain Chen's final transmission was heard across half the galaxy. "You were warned." The Leviathan's response lasted exactly 17 seconds. In that brief span of time, humanity permanently altered the balance of galactic power and demonstrated why their species would never again be underestimated by any civilization in known space. The human ship's weapons didn't fire in the conventional sense. Instead, they manipulated the fundamental forces of reality itself. Gravitational fields collapsed in on themselves, creating microscopic black holes that consumed hegemony vessels, and then evaporated in brilliant flashes of Hawking radiation. Space-time curvature weapons twisted the fabric of the universe, causing enemy ships to implode as the dimensions around them folded inward. But perhaps most terrifying of all were the causality disruptors, weapons that attacked not just the physical structure of enemy vessels, but their very existence in the timeline. Ships didn't just explode. They ceased to have ever been built, their crews' memories edited out of reality until only empty space remained where moments before a mighty dreadnought had been fighting for its life. War Marshal Grixtalk watched in horror as a supposedly invincible fleet was systematically erased from existence. The two planet killer siege engines, weapons that had taken decades to construct and represented the pinnacle of hegemony engineering, simply vanished between one heartbeat and the next as if they had never existed at all. "Retreat!" he screamed into his communication system. All remaining vessels, emergency jump, abandon the engagement. But retreat was no longer an option. The Leviathan's weapons had created localized distortions in space-time that prevented faster-than-light travel. The surviving hegemony ships found themselves trapped in normal space, their escape routes cut off by technology they couldn't comprehend, let alone counter. In 17 seconds, the galaxy's most feared military force had been reduced to floating debris and fading energy signatures. Of the 352 vessels that had begun the attack, only Grixtalk's flagship remained intact, and only because the humans had deliberately spared it. Captain Chen's voice carried across the emergency frequencies, reaching not just a surviving hegemony ship, but monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. "War Marshal Grixtalk, your fleet has been neutralized. You will return to hegemony space and inform your leadership that humanity is prepared to coexist peacefully with all species that extend the same courtesy to us. However, any future acts of aggression will be met with permanent consequences." The implications of her words were clear. Humanity possessed weapons that could not just destroy their enemies, but erase them from history itself. It was a level of power that made the concept of conventional warfare obsolete. In the days that followed the Battle of Nexus Point, the political landscape of the galaxy underwent rapid and dramatic changes. The Vorthan Crystallarchy, recognizing the new reality, immediately opened formal diplomatic channels with Earth. Their crystalline ships began escorting human vessels through their territory, ensuring safe passage for the species that had become the galaxy's undisputed technological leaders. Queen Mind HFY of the Swarm Collective took a different approach. Her biomechanical fleets withdrew to the Outer Rim territories, where they began adapting their living ships to incorporate principles reverse-engineered from observations of human technology. The Swarm had always been masters of evolution and adaptation. Now they sought to evolve beyond their biological limitations. Supreme Construct Alpha Prime made perhaps the most logical decision of all. The Mechanarch Union's artificial intelligence networks opened full data-sharing protocols with humanity, recognizing that cooperation with technologically superior beings was the only path to continued relevance in the new galactic order. But it was the broader implications of humanity's capabilities that truly transformed the galaxy. Species that had been locked in territorial disputes for centuries suddenly found their conflicts meaningless when faced with beings who could manipulate reality itself. Trade routes that had been controlled by military might were now open to all, protected by human patrol vessels that no force in the galaxy dared challenge. The Leviathan remained at Nexus Prime for another month, serving as humanity's embassy, while formal diplomatic relations were established with dozens of species. Ambassador Vasquez worked tirelessly to negotiate treaties and trade agreements, her efforts laying the foundation for a new era of galactic cooperation. During this time, humanity revealed additional capabilities that further cemented their dominance. Their manufacturing techniques could create materials at the molecular level, producing substances that were lighter than air yet stronger than any known metal. Their energy generation systems tapped directly into quantum vacuum fluctuations, providing unlimited power for their massive vessels. Most remarkably, their faster-than-light drives didn't just move ships through space. They created temporary folds in space-time that allowed instantaneous travel across galactic distances. As the Leviathan finally departed Nexus Prime to continue its exploration mission, Captain Shin left behind a galaxy forever changed. The age of human expansion had begun, but it was an expansion built on technological superiority rather than military conquest. Humanity had learned from their own violent history and chosen a different path, one that offered partnership to those who sought it and overwhelming consequences to those who chose aggression. The galaxy had indeed never recovered from its first look at humanity's capabilities. But perhaps recovery was the wrong word. Instead, the arrival of the Leviathan had marked the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, one where the impossible had become routine, and the future held possibilities that no species had ever dared to imagine. In the end, humanity had achieved something unprecedented. They had become gods without losing their humanity, and the galaxy was better for it. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.